You're listening to the To Write Love on Our Arms podcast, a show about mental health and the things that make us human. Or in that same vein, we know that the conversation has been a latecomer to our story and even a latecomer to the scene of how people understand mental health. But I guess we'll start with Alex. What was your, first introduction into the breadth of topics dealing with eating disorders, disordered eating, and body dysmorphia?
Well, yeah. I remember going to theaters for the very first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire back in 2002. And, I've loved superhero movies ever since. But there was a moment in that movie where, he gets bit by the spider and at that point, he's very much a scrawny nerd. And then he goes to bed. And then when he wakes up, he is fully transformed into Spider-Man. He's no longer scrawny. He has, these huge abs.
Ripped.
He's very ripped. He's very jacked. And, kind of from that point forward, most superhero movies have a moment like that, whether it's, a physical transformation like that, or just look at this shirtless guy and how jacked he is. Yeah. So, growing up with that, I didn't realize at the time, how much I was internalizing that. But now that I have kinder eyes and have a little bit of perspective with age, you kind of realize, oh, I was trying to live up to those standards as a kid, or still even now, comes up when I go to the gym or something. But you kind of have to, those big moments in pop culture history with, a shirtless superhero, I've had to realize, they're working 6 months or a year for that body. Their diet is very strict.
Extreme.
They're posing and the lighting is exquisite for those scenes,
even makeup.
They have makeup for that. And so even though I'm seeing it, it's not actually a real depiction of what that actor looks like. Even.
So you said, kind of 2002 was the first time you realized, almost what the transition story looks like. How about just kind of your growth into understanding that how that affects you is indeed a mental health conversation?
Yeah. So, the way that we view our bodies and compare them is not a healthy thing to do. So having to unlearn that behavior and that kind of standard that I'm placing for myself was something that I had to do in order to get better with my own mental health, really.
I agree with Alex. I feel especially from my experience, a lot of my experience has been more around body dysmorphia. And if I were to go back to the origin of what I think is the origin is growing up around my family, I've always been a very thin individual, very thin. I used to be called names in high school, just because I've always been this very, very thin person. And even through maturity, I'm just I was wishing, because all of the friends that were popular in school were a little bit, thicker in body structure. So I was always oh my God, these girls are always the ones getting the attention. And these girls are always the ones, everyone looked up to them. And I just kind of faded in the background. And I was just okay, well, maybe I need to do something to gain some weight. But then at the time, skinny was in, but I wanted to look like something else. And but then over time, and I think once I started going to college in Antigua, I recognized that, what, you look okay. You look okay. And then as I started dating, I realized that, okay, well, I remember this one guy I dated, he was yeah, well, you dress like a guy, because I always wore sneakers. It's you dress like a guy and you're really thin. And that was I think probably was a really pivotal time for me, because this was my first boyfriend. He was telling me that I was really thin. I already in high school was being called really thin. It's not a thing that's very attractive in my culture. I think being thin growing up in the islands, people looks at it like you're poor or you're you don't have food. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so because you're not looking at a particular body, weight structure, you're not well off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I just never really wanted to be thin. But then once I came to the US, I started gaining weight, eating some different things, having exposure to like McDonald's and those kind of things, the fast food. And every time I went back to Antigua, on summer breaks and things like that, my family would make comments. And we have this thing, it's like family dinner every month. And I always try to schedule my trips around family dinner so I can get to see everyone. But it was always like a source of anxiety for me because going back, it always felt like a comment was being made on your weight.
Yeah.
And whenever I looked in the mirror, who I was not what I saw. I think as you age, as you mature, as you become more and more educated in the realm of mental health and just kind of like psychology and stuff, you learn how unhealthy those thoughts are, and you get to see yourself in a different light. I had to unlearn, like Alex said, a lot of the things that I felt about myself.
Yeah, you're hitting on a number of really interesting topics here about the ways that we kind of learn what beauty, what attractive standards look like. And, Alex and I, we can certainly relate on the American pop culture side of things.
Yes.
And certainly, these are generational conversations.
Correct.
What our grandparents saw as beauty standards
Correct.
are very different than what we see, and certainly probably different than what your daughter is seeing at even her age. And with that, you have a cultural gap between
sure.
the places that we're learning and the places that I'm going home to relate with family. And
Correct.
We're getting so many different layers of being bombarded by.
But this I feel like this goes back to even like learning in school. Remember Hansel and Gretel? Remember that story?
Yeah, they were.
And then the witch was like, they passed her a bone and she was like, oh, you're too skinny. I need to fatten you up a little bit more. So when you go back and you look at that, you're like, okay, is this the way to go? You know what I mean?
Yep,
is this what I should have
absolutely.
looked like? Or is this the best way to be? I remember watching, there was a movie with, is it Martin? Not Martin. What's this guy's name? It's I think Norbit. Not Norbit.
Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy
Yeah.
is the one. Not Norbit. It's the one where
So
Professor
glad you're here,
Klump.
Alex.
Is it Klump?
Nutty
Nutty
Professor.
Professor.
Yeah.
That one
There
where
we
he
go.
was like, really nice and strapping when he was a more heavy set guy and he just wanted to look like something else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And once he took the pill or whatever potion he took, he became this like, the ladies liked them. He had more confidence.
Well, and this is all being sold as a comedy, right?
Correct.
So this isn't
Yeah.
even an honest. This isn't even a serious, investigation of
Right.
what body image.
But these are the
is.
things that we are seeing
Totally.
from the time that we were kids, you know?
And when you make jokes about something, the reason that a joke is funny is because there's a little bit of truth to it. So even though that movie is saying it and is like, aha, this is funny, there's
There's a
still
message.
subliminally still conveying that same message
Yeah.
that they're trying to make fun of, but they're not. They're saying it.
Well, and a roar of laughter ends a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
that is kind of how we've created our society. That when people start laughing, that's the end of the conversation.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the period.
On to something
Mhm.
else. So kind of looking back through, our journeys of becoming more aware of who we are, how we relate to our bodies, and all the ways that we integrate the information around us. You mentioned stories, we've mentioned movies. Were there any particular kind of celebrity voices that drove you to maybe shape or frame yourself to fit a mold that was literally someone else's body?
Again, there's been so many superhero movies, and you look at an actor like Hugh Jackman, who's been playing the same superhero for several years, and he's played Wolverine in several different movies,
Decades now.
literal decades, every other year, every couple years, and each time he's on screen, he's bigger and more ripped than he was in the last movie.
Yeah.
He like keeps upping the standard. And I kind of had to realize, you know, Hugh Jackman is 6'2", 6'3", whatever, and you know has all
Which
this
is not
stuff.
comic accurate, by the way.
Not comic accurate. Wolverine was a little
little
was a short king. So like having to realize like, oh, like we just have different body types. Like even no matter how hard I work out, no matter what kind of diet or exercise plan, like I'm still not gonna look like that just because, you know, I have a 5'10" frame. You know, whatever happens, it's not gonna be translatable.
Yeah.
So I've had to realize, you know, what you'd mentioned a couple times about trying to be something different.
Mhm.
And I'm realizing that I have to just try to be myself.
Yeah.
And I have to, this is the body that I live in. I have to try to be nice to myself, try to be nice to this body. And that's pretty much, that's all I can do is just be kind to myself and take care of myself.